Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Like I said in the introduction, I'm here with Adam Swick of Marathon Digital. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben, and thanks to the listeners for listening.
Yeah, what's fun about this, Adam, is we actually found out that we're relatively neighbors. It's when people think Bitcoin mining, they think Texas and ERCOT, and then we're up here in Minnesota, sleepy little Minnesota. So yeah, I'm really glad that we're going to get a chance to sit down and kind of hash out all things power and Bitcoin mining and Marathon.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's so true. It seems like such a big space, but on the other hand, it's quite small. And it's funny when you run into people, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you reach out and realize that I think you're, 10, 15 minutes away
Yeah,
from each
yeah.
of our home offices. So small world indeed. And it's, again, crazy how frequently these serendipitous moments happen. And so very pleased to see that this podcast exists and very honored that I was invited to be on it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm flattered by that last part. No, of course I was very excited to get you on the show. So it's no, this will be good. So where I like to always start with guests, Adam, is I think it does really help the rest of the conversation to hear your background and where you're coming from, and then what in the world brought you to this crazy ecosystem of Bitcoin mining and Marathon. And so, yeah, if you could just run us through your background and how that brought you to Marathon.
Sure. And definitely one of my favorite questions as well. Everybody has a crazy, funny, lucky, weird
Yes.
story about what brought them to this world. And so happy to share mine. My background resume would be a little more boring, exciting for me, but might not be the most exciting for others. Started in
Sure.
consulting, learned a lot about how businesses operate, how they could improve, worked with lots of smart people. Spent some time in early stage venture capital investing. Similar, I feel like across both those roles, the main thing I learned was how to learn, which I underappreciated what an important skill that was. The ability to learn quickly and on topics that you had zero idea about, whether it be a new consulting client you were walking into or a new startup that was coming in to pitch you on this massive problem that you didn't even know existed. It taught you A, to be humble and recognize that you don't know as much as you think you know, but B, to be open and learn fast. So that's where it all started. Ended up then going back to school to get an MBA and came out of that really focused on crypto, and found myself launching a small crypto hedge fund. Then found myself working at Kraken, the digital asset exchange,
Mm.
on their strategy team and their finance team, which was a super exciting time. Then actually left the world of crypto, went back to early VC investing, and realized that I just missed it. Once you're in this world, it's very hard to leave, and so looked around a lot of places and was lucky enough to find Marathon, and have been here about 2 years. So that's the resume background. The crypto story is
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
when I was working in consulting. I had one of my good coworker friends looking to leave, and he was choosing between a couple of different jobs. And one of those jobs he was choosing between was Coinbase. And so, in order to serve as a sounding board for him as he made this next career decision, I had to understand what Coinbase did. And so, I'm very thankful to this friend, clearly, because he's the one that sent me down the rabbit hole, and I've kind of been learning ever since. And this is what's brought me to today, which is now, as mentioned, at Marathon Digital Holdings. What really drew me here was the team. How smart, how kind, how driven they are, and that's what's keeping me here today. And the coming from the crypto side, obviously, the mining space has a lot of people that come from crypto and some that come from energy.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely come from the crypto side, and so I've been learning about the energy side. And I thought crypto was the confusing, complicated sector. The energy side even more so, which again all goes to learning, and it's all part of the fun. So uh,
Oh my gosh.
that's
Yeah. And
what
it's
brings us to today.
yeah. Well, thank you, Adam. Yeah. And yeah, the energy component to all this is a deep, deep, deep rabbit hole. Hence the
Yeah,
show. I likewise, like you, I try to be as curious as I can be, and it's like, wow, I gotta talk to the smarter people, the people that are a lot smarter than me. It's a deep rabbit hole, that's for sure.
Yeah, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And it's, first starting to learn about Bitcoin, I thought I understood it and, would be explaining it to friends as you first do when you're so excited, and they would ask questions which I would not have the answer to. And I'd realize I had to learn more. Uh, Finally thought I wrapped my head around this distributed ledger technology. And then next thing I know, buying a used miner on eBay just to dabble with it. And that thing showed up and I had no idea what to do with it. And so again, I felt like I was back to square zero on the learning curve when it came to mining in my apartment, which my significant other was not a fan of, having that thing humming away in the living room. But again, it's just learning after learning after learning. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people in the space. And what makes it hard to leave the space is everything else seems slow compared to crypto and mining in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially like you said, kind of that transition from crypto to Bitcoin. I'd be curious to hear like what maybe was the draw for you about the physical infrastructure, the power, or like kind of the energy side. Just and I ask because it's quite a bit different than high return profile of a crypto portfolio, that kind of thing. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. And so to level set, I think it's first that recognition. Bitcoin is hard to understand. I mean, you have to have somebody that is willing to listen for a decent amount of time to truly appreciate how revolutionary it is. And unfortunately, 5 seconds is not enough. And you have to have someone that's dedicated and open to understanding. And it's hard. And people learn different ways and are drawn to different ways of thinking, visual learners, etc. And this is just one of the things I realized when I had the crypto hedge fund is as I was explaining the idea of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies to investors in the space,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them didn't get it because they couldn't see it. They couldn't feel it. They couldn't wrap their head around it. But I realized as I was walking them through the basics of Bitcoin, when I mentioned mining, they seem to get that more. And when you go to a Bitcoin miner, even when you have one of these ASICs humming away in your living room, like I had at one point, it's different. You can see it, you can feel it. It's one thing for me to say this is converting electrons into a store of value via Bitcoin, but it's different to like see it there. And I think it makes it real for a lot of people that learn it in that way, whatever way that is. And so I found it very helpful as a way to orange pill a lot of people is to really start with mining because I can show them pictures and I can show them videos. And if I can kind of set that hook with here's a physical thing and this is a part of this bigger thing of Bitcoin, it's been a great way to start a lot of conversations. Those conversations obviously get very complicated, as mentioned, because here we are, mining sits at that intersection of blockchain and energy, which arguably are two of the most confusing spaces, and we sit at the middle of them. So, it's perfectly reasonable why people don't completely understand what we're doing, why regulators wrestle with it, but also all the more important why it's up to us to take the time to kind of educate and at times oversimplify. I think we fall victim to the curse of knowing too much. You live in this world all day, every day, live it, breathe it. You start use acronyms and simplified things and throw around things like joules per terahash and megawatts. These are not things that you knew 10 years ago before you got sucked into this space. But it's all part of the fun and the challenge.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think, I've started to experience a lot of that most recently. Again, you're in the space for long enough and it just becomes no-brainers. I think the funniest one for me is, now on, I think especially Twitter and some other, spaces, you see people throwing around 25, 50, 100 megawatt sites as if that's like the norm. And it's like, wait, hold on. Let's just pause here for a second.
Yeah.
Even a 25 megawatt operation, that's a serious operation.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. We have the exact same thing as we're always speaking with partners from around the world. At times we will ask, oh, how big of a mining site are you have? And they almost sound embarrassed to admit to Big Marathon that, they have a 10 megawatt site. And you're like, no, that's a serious Bitcoin mine, and great for you that you've built something like that. Because this is hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you get out, so I'm very privileged. My day job, I get a chance to go crawl around mining facilities. I get to go poke around and see these things in person. And I just most recently was at a facility where their pilot program was a 15 megawatt operation inside of a decommissioned coal plant, and you can't see the end of the shelving. I mean, this thing, it's just so impressive when you get to see it in person, and it's awesome that companies are willing to offer up tours to just everyday people too. So I'd encourage the audience, if you guys haven't been into a mining facility, you should go check one out. It's pretty incredible.
Definitely. It's almost too easy to put into words when you say things like, oh, Marathon is driving towards this 23 exahash target. And you're like, okay, that's a sentence. I can wrap my head around it. But then you start to ask the follow-up questions like, okay, how many machines? That's just under 200,000 machines. And 200,000 is exactly a number you can't visualize until you start going to these places, and the logistics of keeping 200,000 things clean, running, operational, keeping track of which ones need maintenance, which ones need fixing. The devil is in the details. And so definitely a newfound appreciation every time I get to go to the sites, because they are well-oiled machines themselves.
Absolutely. And this is a good segue, because Adam, I wanted to dig into Marathon and chat about Marathon. And so one of the things that when you look at Marathon, you guys are pretty natively an asset-like company. You guys are really leaning on infrastructure partners kind of throughout the stack there. I would just be curious, I mean, is that what the future is going to look like for you guys? Are you guys exploring alternative? Basically, how do you see this playing out in the future?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head in terms of where we're coming from. We historically has focused on this asset light, leaning on infrastructure partners, and I do believe that is the best way to grow fast. Any dollar that you're spending on infrastructure is a dollar you could have spent on another ASIC, another Bitcoin miner. And so if the goal is to grow fast, that's the way to do it. And that's what we were really focused on over the past couple of years. And, obviously there are then pros and cons to this model. And so if you start to think through all the key portions of, working with a third party to host your machines or self-hosting, there are things like, who controls the operations? Obviously you might want to have your own way of doing things. That's a benefit of doing it yourself. OpEx can be slightly lower. Operating expenditures can be slightly lower if you do it yourself, because obviously any third-party hoster is going to be building in a margin for themselves.
Sure.
One of the benefits of third-party hosting is a little easier to be geographically diversified. It's a lot easier to select amongst different providers, hosters, when oftentimes if you're doing it by yourself, you might be all in on one location. But some of the obvious pros and cons. To answer your question, what we're thinking about it moving forward is kind of like a portfolio approach to mining. And there, just as your own investment portfolio has stocks, equities, which are more volatile, perform well in bull markets, perform less well in bear markets, you balance that out with your bonds and your fixed income. You also have cash. You might also have gold. We can kind of think of, in what's the last one? Alternative assets, like private equity, venture capital. We can kind of think of examples for each of those in a Bitcoin mining portfolio. And so I would argue that the third-party hosting is kind of like the stocks of our portfolio. Performs super well in bull markets, performs less well in bear markets. Self-hosting is kind of like the bonds of the portfolio. They're more stable, more control over them, etc. Cash is basically, obviously, Bitcoin or gold. It would be the equivalent of Bitcoin, which we hold on our balance sheet. And the last piece is then those alternative investments, which is going to be things like renewable energy credits. And so Marathon historically has been very overweight on the stock part of that portfolio, the third party hosting. And as we move forward, I think you'll start to see us focus on it more as a portfolio. And there's a right time for each right piece to be put together.
Well, that's fantastic, and what a awesome analogy to draw to. So I appreciate that a lot, because I think it helps just lay out how you guys think about your mining operation, and then what we can start to look for into the future. Maybe just speaking to like the present day, what if any, do you guys have relationships with the power companies at the sites that you're at? I'd love to maybe just hear, like, how involved in your infrastructure stack do you get just kind of in the present day?
Yeah, more and more every day. And this is, I think, a good trend that we're seeing in the industry. I would say, I think who coined it best was our friends over at Auradine, which was the idea that mining kind of started as hobbyists. I was one of them. People tinkering around. Then we kind of entered phase 2, which was the industrial mining era. And so that was people building these massive multi-hundred megawatt sites. Now, Auradine calls it phase 3 being like a responsible partner of the energy and financial ecosystem. But the way that I simplify this is, I think we're noticing a shift from being major customers of electrical generators, utilities, governments, to being a instrument or a tool. I have to think of the right word to capture it. But instead of us showing up and saying, we would like to buy some cheap power, please, we're starting to notice a few of the more forward-looking utilities, governments, energy generators reaching out to us and saying, hey, we've identified a problem and we think Bitcoin mining is the solution. Which means we're developing much stronger relationships with these energy generators, energy investors, governments, as they're recognizing that there are ways to optimize their electrical everything. And so those relationships are all the more important. Educating is super important as we go along on this journey. And different utilities are on different paths. And it's really important to kind of meet them where they are, understand the work they've done, understand the work that they haven't done, and help take them to the next level.
Wow. Yeah, I'm starting to see and hear quite a bit of that too. Would just be curious, are they approaching you guys with, the potential challenges on their grid system, and are they starting to be more open-minded? Because, and I asked that because, previously, a couple of years ago, they weren't so much, or they were just flat out saying, we don't want Bitcoin mining on our grid system, stuff like that. So are they coming to you more open-minded and, a little bit more open book? Is that what you're starting to see?
I think so. It feels like they're more open to the conversation and they want to learn. And I think the benefits of Bitcoin mining are becoming more and more well known in the kind of energy sector, and word is spreading. I like to say that Bitcoin miners are optimizers of energy. And okay, what is that word, optimize? It's kind of meaningless. But I intentionally choose it because it is so broad. And so optimize what? The economics of the site? Yeah, Bitcoin miners can help with that. How many wind, solar developers are partnering with Bitcoin miners to optimize the economics of the site and have that baseload customer that's sitting there to take the electrons reliably? Okay, optimize what else? Optimize the actual performance of the grid. This is what's happening all the time in ERCOT and in other countries around the world, where the grid just has a fundamental supply and demand problem. And yes, we can try to balance a scale by messing with the supply and turning plants on and off. But Bitcoin mining is this new tool that allows you to mess with the demand very, very quickly. And so, between optimizing economics, optimizing actual performance. These are the things that I think are starting to perk the energy. I hope are what is hoping to perk the ears up in the energy sector and cause people to reach out. And I love it when they reach out and say, hey, we have this problem. We think you might be a solution. Could you help us think through it? Those are my favorite conversations to have, which again are very different than 4 years ago, which was us calling and saying, hello, we'd like to buy some power, please. It's just much more interesting conversations, and I think going to lead to better answers for everyone involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's 100%. It's going to lead to a better working relationship, kind of everything up and down the chain. Interestingly, I recently recorded a podcast with ERCOT. So I had a couple representatives from the Large Flexible Load Task Force at ERCOT. They shared some interesting perspectives, and it was actually a lot of undertone of concern over ramp rates and just controllability of this load. So what they found in ERCOT is, with ERCOT being isolated, is kind of this sweet little experiment. It's isolated grid. They can really, and it's a large grid, but it's small enough where, a couple percentage points of usage on that grid system is impactful. So anyways, they shared with me that what they desperately are looking for in like a mining partner, or even, more broadly, they actually didn't say mining a whole lot. They called it large flexible load.
Sounds right.
Yeah. They, one of the things that they expressed was like the creme de la creme for them. And in that relationship is the controllability of the load and just being able to forecast it accurately. Curious, are you hearing things like that in these types of discussions, or has that started to come up?
Yes. It's all of that. It's Bitcoin miners are getting better at what their capabilities are. Even things like overclocking and underclocking. To oversimplify, this world basically started as an on-off. We're mining or we're not mining. But as things, Marathon, we've developed our own firmware that allows us to overclock and underclock. So suddenly that machine that was either 0 or 1 running can now be 0.5 to 1.5 running. And so on the one hand, you have Bitcoin miners getting a lot better at the tools they can offer, and on the other side, you have the energy companies that are getting better at articulating their problems and trying to figure out where those puzzle pieces come together. And so yes, we're seeing it. And again, I think education is a big piece. I was speaking with someone the other day at a university that has a small microgrid. And I was like, have you ever thought about balancing, like with a couple Bitcoin miners to just help balance the microgrid? And he's like, no, don't know much about Bitcoin mining, not for me. I was like, that's surprising to me, but nonetheless went on to ask him some more questions about the microgrid. And he was mentioning how he was struggling with balancing. And I was like, well, to go back to my first question, would a interruptible load that consume, in the size of a shoebox consumes 3 kilowatts and you can turn it on and off within seconds, is that appealing? He's like, well, yeah, I need that. He was, in his lab turning on and off water heaters to help balance the grid. And so just boiling water. And again, shame on me, I suppose, for starting with, have you ever considered Bitcoin mining, as opposed to saying, have you ever considered a, interruptible load that can respond within seconds? But again, it was just different framing led to a very different level of excitement for the conversation. And I think all energy utilities are going through that. And what actually is Bitcoin mining? And once you kind of peek behind the curtain and past some of the headlines that may be misleading, it's very interesting.
Yeah, there's been some really sticky negative narratives out there regarding, I think it's just Bitcoin at large. And so you attach Bitcoin to the mining, and they immediately just have a lot of negative association with that. So, oh wow, what a cool story. Thank you. was that in Minnesota by chance? Is that like the U of M or is that like a university local here?
I'll have to look up exactly where we've been speaking with a lot of universities
Yeah.
trying to push forward research in that. And so it was definitely in the Midwest, because that's the region that I focused on. I selfishly was focused on ones that I could hopefully visit.
Yeah.
But I'll get back to you.
Cool. Yeah. And we should chat offline about maybe a U of M initiative, just right here in our backyard. I think that'd be cool to, I look at Texas and the Texas Blockchain Council. They're so enmeshed with, I think, all the major universities down in Texas. And I think maybe a little side thing we could potentially talk about is how do we get the U of M involved if they're not already? They may be involved, and I just haven't seen anything about it.
I mean, on the pro-con list, we're definitely winning for a more hospitable environment weather-wise for these Bitcoin miners. So let's definitely make it happen. I could use some as a somewhat new Minnesotan, I could definitely use some of these Bitcoin miners heating up more things up here.
I've got a couple M30Ss in my basement, Adam.
You're ahead of me. Yeah, there's the in-floor heating right there.
There you go. Yeah, if you don't mind the noise. Well, no, we'll take a Steve Barber black box. We'll kill the noise. We'll channel the heat. It'll be great. It'll be fun.
Hey, I enjoy sleeping to a little white noise, so this all sounds good to me for those winter nights.
It's a hell of a white noise. It's like 100 decibel white noise. Yeah, no, it's all good. We're actually kind of going in a direction that I was curious about as well. Marathon. You guys have a hell of an R&D team, and you touched on it with like underclocking, overclocking. You've got tech built up and around that. I'd love for you to maybe just expand a little bit more on what is your R&D team up to. What are you guys looking at?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about Marathon as well, is just really trying to push the envelope in terms of what's possible, and part of it is genuine excitement from everybody internally about wanting to try new things, and that just being the general spirit of entrepreneurship within Marathon. And part of it is forced in the sense of when you're mining with 200,000 miners, you're running into challenges that other people are not running into. And at some point, you're kind of like, this is broken. I need to fix it. And so that's the backstory. But yeah, the things that we're focused on, I think it really all started with our pool, which is exciting that we run and operate our own pool, MaraPool, which A, increases just control of things, B, increases transparency. It is pretty cool to have a public company where you can, in theory, all of the analysts' revenue forecast should be 100% accurate, because you can know exactly when we're making any dollar watching those Bitcoins come into our wallet. But it also allows us to try to make small enhancements. And so, to, again, greatly oversimplify, think about things. If you're running a public pool, your pool has to support every machine out there. Whereas Marathon, our fleet today is largely made up of two broad types of machines, the kind of S19 series and XP series. And so we don't have to support all of those things, which, again, in theory, might hopefully speed up the pool a little bit. Similar, again, to oversimplify, you think about public pools can't really trust their miners. And so they have to do like an extra check anytime a miner is doing work and making sure that no one's trying to, scam the pool. We trust our own miners. And so we can just remove those extra set of checks, which these aren't 50% improvement. This is like, 0.2% improvement there, 0.2% improvement there. But over the course of, 200,000 machines, this starts to become very meaningful.
Yeah.
So that's our pool, which we're very excited by. It then kind of led to firmware and utilizing a proprietary firmware to manage all of these miners. Really look into overclocking, really look into underclocking, really look into shorter curtailment times and being able to turn on and off a lot quicker, and being able to optimize for your choice at that moment. Do you want to set a target electricity draw, a target hash rate, a target temperature, a target voltage? And we rely on this heavily, and just got to the point where, again, we should do it ourselves. And so that has then spun to many other things, such as investing in other mining ASICs, which allow us to work collaboratively with what is the ideal ASIC out there. Again, the challenges that we've run into with 200,000 is different than when I had one in my living room, and so our wish list was just different. So it's been great to collaborate with ASIC manufacturers along that line. And then the last piece I would say of the stack that we've been focused on is custom built immersion solutions. Ooh. Which really came to the need there was with our joint venture in the UAE, which air cooled was not an option. And so, very exciting opportunity to do the joint venture in the UAE. I think our ops team almost fainted when we said that we were going to build a 250 megawatt mine in the UAE. They said, literally, could you pick anywhere else in terms of the things that our miners do not like are heat and dust. And and if you were to find the most heat, yes, and you seem to have picked the place with the most heat and the most dust. But it's actually been working super well. And so just trying to think through, fixes that noise problem that you and I, to help you sleep better at night, so you don't have to have as noisy of fans. Really reduces the amount of maintenance required on the miners. Again, makes it much more flexible, which climate. And this is all in its infancy. Bitcoin mining is not that old. Bitcoin mining at an enterprise scale is even younger. Immersion hydro is even younger. So these innovations are substantial. These are big leaps. We are not flattening the curve yet. But heat reuse is another thing. I could talk forever about all the cool things that we have, and hopefully more exciting news to come soon from both Marathon and the entire industry as people are innovating.
Oh, absolutely. And so thank you for walking through the tech stack there. I mean, it's couple things on that is, I think as companies like Marathon look to really continue. I mean, you guys really are, people look at Marathon as one of the leaders in the space. So I think as you guys continue to navigate that position in the market, it's how do you have everything kind of in-house? So like you said, that you can have that type of finite control over it. And so I've got a good buddy in the Twin Cities here as well. I give a shout out to Max Yankee with Urkel Pool. I know just how difficult getting a pool up and running is. And I mean, they've been crushing it. They've been doing a really good job. So it's like, even just the stuff on the pool side, like, man, it's not easy. So, I mean, kudos to you guys and your team. And then the form factor on hydro and immersion and all that is, I actually really like the M53s, the What's miners. I don't know a whole lot about Bitmain's hydro stuff, but I've been a little bit closer to the new MicroBT M53 series. Super excited to see this like really nice, tidy package closed loop system, because single phase, I'm curious to get your take, but single phase seems to invite challenges, whether it's keeping the environment clean or keeping your all of your components working optimally. I'm curious if how that goes from immersion to hydro. Like what do you guys see as the better of the two?
No, well, I mean, pros and cons to everything and challenges with all of them. And it's kind of which battle do you want to fight? In the UAE with the joint venture, we went with immersion. And so we've gotten really good at the immersion side of things. Were there challenges? Yes. But did we learn and quickly overcome them? Yes. And so hopefully we don't have to overcome them anymore. Hopefully we've kind of overcome a lot of that learning. That's what we've kind of seen. The first container is the most difficult. 2 through 10 are a little challenging, 10 through 20. And then, you figure it out, which was, again, all part of the fun. And in regards to miners, it's an exciting time. As we're recording this, we're in this fun time period where we just heard a lot of announcements of miners coming, but the miners are not yet in anyone's hands. And so kind of in an exciting sit and wait period, and very excited once those miners actually showing up in people's hands to start hearing the evaluations, the pros, the cons of all of these. But again,
Have
just evidence a lot.
Have you? Sorry to jump in. Have you gotten
No,
to
please.
see Have you touched and felt the S21s yet? I don't know if you
I
can say
personally,
what-
I have not. I know some of our team members. I don't know if they've actually gotten to touch or feel it. But I think the XP came out, and everybody's oh man, our minds are blown. Innovation's never going to continue after this, and here we are again making another big leap across manufacturers, like you said, MicroBT, Canon, Antminer, Auradine. All those that I am not rattling off, apologies, but the innovation continues.
Yeah, it's a wild time, that's for sure. And we're recording end of September here in 2023. We'll see how long people go, or how far people go back on the podcast.
Let the record show.
Timestamp it. Yeah.
Today's date. Yes. Captain's log.
Yes. You've teased it a little bit a couple of times. You guys have a 250 megawatt joint venture project going on with the UAE. Maybe how did that originate? Walk me through it, I guess, if you could.
Sure. And it kind of great question, because it brings together a lot of what we've talked about. This was kudos to this is in Abu Dhabi, and so kudos to them and their utility and their sovereign wealth fund over there for identifying the problem. They have a electrical generation demand mismatch. During the summer, they can consume a lot of electricity running air conditioners, but on summer nights and for the not summer months, the electrical demand is much lower. And so there's this major gap. Clearly, you have to build out generation to satisfy that max demand on the hottest day to run all the air conditioners.
Yeah.
But that means a lot of it's sitting idle for most of the year. This is exacerbated by the fact that a lot of their water is desalinated. And so they actually have to keep a lot of these energy generation mechanisms running just to desalinate water. And so, just huge problem. And again, kudos to them for identifying, hey, Bitcoin mining might fix this. And so reached out, had a conversation, confirmed that, yeah, we think it could fix it too. And then it happened very quickly. Started with a small pilot where, again, we really stressed our ops team in saying, well, let's try this. We worked very closely to try to develop what we thought was a great immersion cooling container that could survive the elements out there, deployed it during a hot month, held our breath, and watched for 3 months when this container ran without any interventions needed. No maintenance, no anything. It just hummed along for 3 months.
That's fantastic.
And I think everybody looked around and was like, yeah, this can work. This will work. And from there, partnered with our friend 02, is the partner in the joint venture. They own 80%, we own 20%, and we are building in the middle of deploying a 250 megawatt mine across 2 sites, one 50 megawatt site, one 200 megawatt site in the Abu Dhabi region. It's using the immersion cooling. It's using, obviously, firmware is incredibly important over there to maintain temperatures. Curtailment is incredibly important. So, as you mentioned, end of September, so we're coming out of hot summer months. And so the machines are shutting down during those peaks of the day when everybody's running their air conditioners, and then they're turning on at night. And as we enter into winter, they'll continue to run all the time. But it was this really great partnership of working with the local utility, EWEC, and then the Sovereign Wealth Fund in terms of investment dollars, 02, our operational partners. And again, everybody just got it. And it's going super well. And I'm hoping people are following along with this in other countries, regions, and other even small electrical utilities see this and see what's possible. Because again, if you can do it with 250 megawatts in one of the harshest environments, you can do this anywhere.
Right.
And so it's been a lot of fun And some great work has been done across Marathon and several of our partners to make this happen. But hopefully we'll be continuing to deploy and targeted to be fully energized this year.
Wow. It's insanely cool. So I think maybe just to like boil it down even simpler, the solution that you guys are bringing to them is helping. Is it helping with the revenue, like smoothing out the revenue to keep the utility running? Or I guess it's probably a combo platter of like solutions, because you're balancing, because I don't think they run at 60 hertz over there, but you got to keep the grid balanced, which,
you're right. It's both. Number one, it's, like we said, optimizing economics or optimizing the actual performance. Optimizing the performance, they wanted someone to help balance as they have a lot of clean energy coming online. They have a lot of nuclear. And so having someone that can turn on and off, which we're doing, and it was optimizing the economics. If you have excess generation built out, someone has to pay for that excess generation to just sit there doing nothing. And instead we can, help pay for that excess generation to sit there. Back of the envelope numbers in 2021, I think the UAE produced 150-ish terawatt hours of electricity, but only consumed 129. What I'm basically saying is, if you assume they could have, let's pick an assumption number. If you assume they could have taken all of their excess electricity and monetized it at 3 cents a kilowatt hour, that's $600 million. Obviously, like, there's a lot of assumptions in there. You can't perfectly capture every spare electron, and that's at 3 cents a kilowatt hour. Like, again, Bitcoin mining is producing more than 3 cents a kilowatt hour. But these are big numbers. If you're able to capture this difference between the production and consumption and optimize things.
Man. And I mean, that it's kind of like the crux of this whole podcast starting, is like that type of relationship that you guys are, that you have established and that you are, building and making more robust. Like that is, for me, that's kind of the goal. The dream is to help bridge that gap and have those relationships form. So that's so cool to hear. And again, we geographically live close to each other. So Adam, I'll probably bug you for like a follow-up when you guys get farther along in that relationship, just to like, let's just dive deep into it at some point in the future.
Yeah, we'll bring along some pictures. Again, it's just legitimately cool stuff. And I mean, this is one example, and there are examples across Marathon and across the broader Bitcoin mining community of people just doing plain cool stuff.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to keep a tab on the time, Adam, we're bright and early. We're not kind of, we started this podcast bright and early. We both have busy days. So what I'd love to maybe kind of end the show with here, Adam, is your Chief Growth Officer at Marathon. Walk us through, me and the audience, through what the next 2, 5, 10 years looks like for Marathon. What can you share with us?
Yeah, let's see. I think it's let's call it focus on 3 things off the top of my head. Number one is continuing to focus on developing that technology stack. That is what unlocks a lot of value for shareholders and unlocks a lot of performance enhancements that allow us to just mine more efficiently. So investing across software, hardware, cooling technologies, I think you'll see us really focus on that. The second is really continuing to focus on partnerships and exactly what this podcast is focused on. Being an instrument to help governments, utilities, people building new wind or solar farms, people with stranded energy, people with flaring issues, landfills with methane leaking issues, and helping to be an instrument to those people. Yes, we have to educate them that we exist, but then again, my favorite phone call is to get and hey, we have this problem. I think you can fix it. Let's work something out.
Yeah,
and that I hope is a big focus of ours moving forward. And both of those are feed into the third, which is just kind of maintaining our agility. Is obviously we have a halving coming up. We have a halving's always coming up in this space, and no one knows what's going to happen. And so instead, all you can really do is preserve your optionality. And the more, if you have infinite options, you'll be okay. Unfortunately, infinite options is hard to do. And so instead, we focus on our tech, we focus on our partnership, we focus on driving near zero cost power, we focused on having the most efficient machines. And all of these pieces together, I think, set us up to survive whatever market we're headed into. And those are kind of how all the pieces come together. It's fun working in this space when, I've consulted for other industries where you could make the 10-year plan. You could write it down. You could say, yeah, this is what's going to happen over 10 years. In this space, arguably, you can't make a 24-hour plan sometimes because, you don't know what Bitcoin price is going to be tomorrow, global hash rate, who's going to announce a new ASIC, what the weather is going to be at one of your major mining sites.
Right.
And I think, Marathon recognizes that, we plan for the 10 years, but we also recognize that the one thing we know is that plan is wrong. And therefore, we have to have the tech in place, have the partnerships in place, have the efficiencies in place to make sure that we are prepared for anything, to survive bad days and to really lean into and take advantage of the great days. And so hopefully we're able to deliver on that. I don't know, check back in that 2 to 5, 10-year time frame.
Yeah, I love it. I think you nailed it. The industry is it's moving at warp speed all the time. So it's that's fantastic. Thank you, Adam. It's going to be fun to watch for sure. So maybe at the end here, why don't you give a handoff to the audience? I don't know if you want that to be for yourself personally or maybe Marathon at large. You can point the audience to, but give a handoff to the audience. I want them to be able to get in touch with you guys if they want.
Sure, I can give you the laydown on all of that. And so our website, easiest way to get there is mara.com, MARA.com. And then we're pretty active on Twitter, as with most Bitcoin folks. You can find Marathon at Marathon DH, short for at Marathon Digital Holdings, so at Marathon DH. And you can find myself at Swick Talk, my last name, at SWICK, Talk, TALK, on Twitter. And so look for us there and reach out with any and all questions. Please let us know if you have a problem where Bitcoin mining could be an instrument to solve it, or know of anybody in your region where Bitcoin mining can be an instrument to solve it, because I think that's the future is heading.
Awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes so that people can easily and quickly find you guys. And Adam, this was, to say it was a blast is an understatement. Thank you very much for your time. This was absolute awesome conversation, and you take care.
Yes. Thanks, Ben, so much. Thanks to all the listeners, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Thanks. Bye. All right. Adam,